Hi everyone, welcome back. So today I thought I could just share some tips with you that if you're thinking about going back to school or if you've already decided to go back, just some tips that would have been really helpful for me when I decided to go back just because I was really naive. There's some aspects that I didn't really think about, and I just thought I would continue where I left off 10 years ago, and that was not the case. So, with that, I'll start with tip number one, which is that you need to be open minded. And by that, I mean, you really need to see this as an experience and kind of take full advantage of that because it is a privilege that many people do not have access to. So, I would suggest kind of like having a list of goals that you would like of personal goals that you would like to achieve. And by this I don't necessarily mean academic or career goals, which is also, you should have those goals, definitely. I mean, you are in school after all, so definitely have those goals. But I was more looking towards what type of person do you want to be at the end of this experience, like what type of person do you want to see at the end of this experience. So kind of like have like what skills would you like to work on, or what strengths would you like to acquire at the end of this, just so you have like a holistic view of the whole experience, and not just have tunnel vision of it just being academics and school, but also the personal aspect. So just kind of having a full package of the whole experience, basically. And then tip number two will be that you also need to kind of prepare yourself for the possibility of failure, or just, yes, failing in some aspects. And I don't mean this academics, which also can happen, that you might maybe not do well in your first assignment or in your first test, but I mean towards more of certain aspects that you don't really think about when you starting off, when you're going to school. So like, for example, working in a group setting. I hadn't worked in a group setting in over 10 years, so I hadn't really thought about that, and realizing, okay, so what aspect of myself is required within a group setting, which it's always going to be different depending on the groups that you're in and the type of people that you're in a group with. So sometimes you might be the person who's taking charge of the group, and sometimes you might be taking a back seat in the group, but still working towards the end goal of the group, basically. The other aspect might also be technology. You might also just find technology just a little bit challenging. So like I said, I hadn't been in school for 10 years, and by the time I went back, technology had completely changed. Now obviously, I wasn't in when I was in school, I was not in the stone, it was not in the stone ages, but obviously technology had obviously advanced quite a lot. So for example, everyone in my lecture hall had a laptop, and they were using their laptops for their textbooks. So they had digital textbooks, and they were taking notes on their laptops, and I had never done that before. So it was just like a completely different new thing, and I had to like kind of learn to take notes while listening to the lecturer, while trying to understand what the lecturer is saying, and also asking questions, and also asking listening to everyone else asking questions. So it was just kind of like a lot of multitasking, which you eventually get the hang of, obviously, but it just takes a while. And it's just, at first it's just completely new, and you are taken aback by the whole thing. But like I said, after a while, you just kind of like, okay, now you become the person who takes notes on their laptop and asks questions and listens, and it's just, you actually find the whole thing to be a lot more efficient. It's just, I was really surprised at the fact that no one owned a pen or a notebook, and people only had pens when it was time to write exams. And I was just like, wait, what? Yeah, it was completely interesting at first. The other aspect that you might fail at first is study methods. And this is also something that I struggled with, just because the study method I had in my first degree did not work with this degree. So I had to find a new study method, and that required a lot of trial and error. So really allow yourself to continuously try different study methods until you find one that really works for you. And you can find different study methods by asking by speaking to the people in your class, like, hey, what do you use, how do you study, or speaking to your school counselor, your educational counselor or academics counselor. They're really also helpful. Getting a tutor for a specific module, or also going onto YouTube has a ton of people YouTube channels that are dedicated specifically to academics, so really do take advantage of that. I started using YouTube for study purposes really kind of like in my second year, but I really wish I had kind of um known about it, or not necessarily known about it, but been more geared towards using it in my first year. But when you, like I said, I hadn't been in school for 10 years, and prior to that I just never thought of using YouTube for studying reasons. But it is extremely helpful. So yeah, I would really suggest that you go on to that. And then tip number three is also to expect in terms of finances. So with the financial aspect, depending on how you are dividing your, if you are going to work and studying, or you are studying part-time and working full-time, or if you're completely not working, how we you have to kind of like prepare for yourself in terms of how your finances will look, because your finances will reflect um the kind of like the choice you've made, whether to work full-time or part-time or not at all. And kind of, yes, it is obvious, but you really, it the first few months, I could say, of not receiving a consistent income, or your income going to a big chunk of your income going towards your studies, at first it's kind of like, oh wow, it's quite, yeah, it's a lot for your mind to process, if it's not something that you really sat down and really thought about and really analyzed and really kind of assess the situation to kind of see how it will affect you. But once you kind of have like a plan, like, okay, this is actually how I'm going to allocate my money, and this is where my money is going to go, you kind of, it you just kind of like rebudget, basically. Yes, you rebudget, and yeah, and then that kind of like becomes the norm. you know um and then with tip number four, there will also be certain challenges that are not academic centered. So with that I mean, for example, the simple thing of like making friends. So for example, with me, I most of the people in my class are 10 to 11 years younger than me. And at first I kind of allowed that to kind of like be a barrier, because you're kind of like, oh my gosh, am I going to be perceived as the auntie of the class, or will people look at me weird, like will people be asking me a lot of questions? And the truth is, don't nobody care. Nobody cares. Yes, you're older and whatever, but that is not at people's focal, it's not at the top of their minds, and it shouldn't be at the top of your mind either. It's just another aspect to you, just like, everyone has different aspects to themselves. The fact that you are older is just one of the things that makes you different. So I'd actually rather use that as an advantage, instead of a something that's going to work against you. So kind of understand that you have different life experiences to the people in your class, and that you might have obviously you also have more life experiences, and that can really help in terms of the friendships that you make. So don't allow your age to be a barrier, basically, towards making friends. Another thing that was also a bit weird for me was the fact that my lecturers were either the same age as me, just a few years older than me, or younger than me. That was completely, yeah, it took me a while to process, especially a lecturer being younger than you. I was just like, oh my goodness, you're 25 and you're my lecturer, or you're my supervisor. Oh wow, and especially when you allow thoughts like that to consume you. Like, I was I kind of like started to think, oh my gosh, what if this person thinks I'm a failure because they are my supervisor and I'm just a student? And I kind of had to sit down with myself and be like, well, yeah, and that's great. You decided to take a chance on your life and to kind of start something new. That's not a reason for anyone to look down on you. It just means that you are in different um area or a different phase of your life than the next person, but it shouldn't be anything else. And it's really is important that you kind of like get yourself out of that rut, or kind of like constantly thinking negatively, which is something I was doing. But once you kind of sit down and you kind of like continuously go back to your why. So always go back to your why did I decide to go to school? Whatever reasons you might have, just always let that be your constant, because the changes are going to come and go, but your why should always be the constant, and just kind of like the thing that kind of like brings you back whenever you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know why I'm here, I don't know why I decided to kind of like completely change my life, or completely take because I know that some people are also going back to school for a different career path, and they can be really really scary. And if you kind of like don't have a constant why, you might not necessarily lose yourself, but you might not be as, I want to say, motivated. But motivation is not really the right word, because obviously motivation comes and goes. But just kind of like having a set goal really does help you to kind of um, wake up the next day and open that laptop and study, basically. Because sometimes it can really be just, a lot for you. But I think more than anything, it's important that you remind yourself this is a new experience, and it is really the best decision that you can possibly make. You are taking a huge leap, and you are believing in yourself to try something new, or to continue and to uplift yourself. And that really takes a lot of strength and a lot of guts, and you should be proud of yourself. And then tip number 5 is give yourself grace and give yourself time. Really, this is a new experience, like I've said, it's something that is completely new. So give yourself the time that you need to figure it all out. But also, don't do it on your own. There is so much help, from your lecturers to the people in your class, your classmates, to the educational counselors, to um counselors in general, because there's also people who are willing to kind of like, there's resources on campus that are kind of like, geared towards helping you and your mental health. So if you feel like you need to just talk to someone, or sometimes also could be like, for example, with me, sometimes you just need to talk to someone who's your age, because sometimes, kind of like spending almost entire week every single week with people who are younger than you can sometimes feel like, oh wow, I've actually lost touch, I don't know what the people my age are doing, you know then do that, kind of like go speak to someone to kind of clear your head, and to kind of refocus your mind, but allow yourself to get the help that you need if you do need help. And yes, and with that, I will see you next time, and I really hope that these tips do help someone. And if you have any tips, please write them down in the comment section, if you feel like it's something that might help someone else out there, or if it's something that you feel that you would have really found useful when you decided to go back to school. And I will see you next time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.